over the weekend on Friday night, the State House of Representatives voted to 93-66 to pass what's called a police reform bill. They call it a police reform bill. And all of this is just a reaction to the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, something Massachusetts police officers should not be responsible for because they have not committed any crimes. This is a rogue cop in Minneapolis who did something bad, who broke the law, and is paying the price for it. That is not indicative of the cops in Shrewsbury or wherever, any of the other 351 towns in this state, that they're doing something wrong and that they're in need of reform, because they're not. And Cindy Chestnut put this better than anyone the other day, and I'm so happy she spoke out. What a brave, strong woman she is. Her husband, Michael, was killed in the line of duty 2 years ago in Weymouth, right around this time, by a quote-unquote unarmed man, person of color, who should have been in jail to begin with because he was a career criminal. And he threw a rock at Michael Chestnut's head and knocked him out. And he stole his gun, shot him with it, and went on to murder Vera Adams, a 77-year-old woman, in her home while he was fleeing. Keep in mind, that was the third police officer who was killed over a 2-year period in this state. 3 months prior to that, Sean Gannon was murdered in Yarmouth by a guy who had 125 priors, 125, all of them violent. 2 years before that, Ronald Tarantino was killed in Auburn doing what was supposed to be a routine traffic stop, except Jorge Zambrano had no license, and he was on probation and didn't feel like going back to jail. So he shot Ron Tarantino. And all three of their killers, 125, Weymouth, and Zambrano, they all should have been behind bars. If our state legislators actually gave a shit about anybody, they would have been immediately pushing for criminal justice reform, and not the kind of criminal justice reform that they like to talk about. The criminal justice reform they like to talk about is Barstool Sports criminal justice reform. That is raising money for or getting rid of bail, keeping douchebags out of jail, shitting on police officers. No, we need real criminal justice reform. And that is stricter sentences, less bail, stop letting assholes back out onto the street that are clearly dangerous. No more, 15th chances. That shit needs to end. There are so many ways you could do that. You could have oversight of judges too. We have a governor's council, 8 members on it. 7 of them are Democrats. And they're the ones who appoint and can remove judges. If they don't act, the state legislature can force them to act, but they don't. And some of these judges who let these people out should be held accountable. They should. But they're not. But they could. We could pass legislation to make sure that happens. But they don't. And they did nothing. So they let 3 police officers, the murders of 3 police officers over a 2-year period of time, go unpunished. Keep in mind, just what? I think it was 2 weeks after Michael Chestnut was killed. 2 more cops in Falmouth were shot. Luckily, they both survived, but we could have had 5. So nothing was done about that. But the second one black guy in Minnesota gets killed by a rogue cop, then we act. And that was the essence of Cindy Chestnut's beautifully written Facebook. Couldn't have said it better myself. And it meant so much coming from her, because I can yammer on about this, but I haven't lost a loved one, right? I haven't had a police officer, family member get killed in the line of duty. So, my perspective is obviously different from hers. To her, this was personal, because more than anything, you could just tell from the tone of her letter, right, that it was hurting her. All this nonsense, like her kids are being raised. That was one of the most powerful parts about that letter, was when she's like, my kids are being brought up in an environment where police are the bad guys and they're vilified. My husband is not a bad guy. My husband was a hero, and he was. And at his ceremony in Weymouth at the high school there, Michael Chestnut's parents were there. His widow was there. And, all these big shots are on the stage. Two of them, one of them was State Senator Patrick O'Connor in the background. The other was State Representative Ron Mariano, both of who represent Weymouth. O'Connor, I guess, voted present, I want to say, people told me, for the first version of the bill in the Senate. So he could have voted against the bill. He chose not to. Mariano's in the State House of Representatives. He voted for it. And it passed 99-66. So what we're here to do tonight is expose some of these people, because we are living in a democracy. And ultimately, we are responsible for this. And all my bitching and whining and your bitching and whining is worthless if you don't vote and if you don't run for office. And so I hope I inspire somebody tonight to do that, to get out to the polls and vote. Because all the people who voted yes for this should pay dearly. They should pay dearly. You can see the entire list there. I know it's kind of small. There's 200 people in maybe a little less than 200 people. No, 160, I want to say, in the State House of Representatives. So we're not going to go over all of them. It's kind of a waste of time. And some of them I'm not even going to bother with. Like, for instance, Liz Miranda's from Boston. She's the worst social justice warrior in the world. But she's from a district that is so blue that you could not possibly ever elect a decent person out of it. You're going to get a ratchet no matter what in her district. So you're stuck with her. So I'm not going to waste my time going after the Liz Mirandas of the world. Why? Because it's in vain. They're there. Get used to them. I've identified about 20 to 25 vulnerable seats here that we can realistically flip. And I want to say it looks like around 35 or 34 representatives are Republican. Every single one of them voted no. So good for them. That is the difference right now between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Is Republicans support the police. They do not blame all the police for the crimes of Derek Chauvin. They don't do that. Democrats, by and large, do. Now, not all of them. Some of them, plenty of them voted no. Because I want to say probably around 30 voted no. Right? I mean, there's some good ones in here. Colleen Jerry over in Drake. She's a great representative. She's a Democrat. She voted no. There's a state representative named Kearney. He's a Democrat. Didn't know that. He voted no. He's obviously a good guy, or her, whatever. But a lot of them are not. So let's look at the bill first of all. So this is kind of like a breakdown of the way that you are going to be affected by this, or the way we all are. Officers will no longer be able to physically detain or frisk suspects based on reasonable suspicion, often done with public safety at the forefront. So the new standard forbids the many instances when reasonable force is permitted to detain a suspect for investigation and frisk them. Police know this stuff better than us. No police were consulted on this bill. No police. The unions, the police unions, which used to have power in the state, are limp dick. They've suddenly realized that all these politicians who they've donated money to over the years have completely sold them out for Black Lives Matter. And I hope they don't forget that. I hope this brings a new voting bloc to the Republican Party. Organized labor. They're spitting in the face of organized labor. They want to bust up. There's nothing the Democrats want to do right now. Then bust up labor unions. So don't forget that, labor unions. They're no longer on your side. The second that your union becomes antithetical to Black Lives Matter or becomes pitted against them somehow, they will sell you down the river too. You mean nothing to them. You're a check in the mail. That's all you are. So that's one thing they can't do. Officers also can no longer use protective custody. So if you're drunk, I mean, when you get PC, because you don't get arrested, it's basically they throw you in the drunk tank. That's gone. You can't do that anymore for some reason. I don't know what the rationale behind that is, but that's gone. Another thing, officers are very limited in their ability to manage dangerous mental health encounter. The new law does not authorize the use of force for this purpose. Responding officers cannot resort to force in cases where a person might be suicidal or dangerous because of his or her mental condition. So if a suicidal, like that incident in Enfield, remember we did a blog on this a month ago. suicidal person attacks a police officer. According to this new law, cops can't even hit back. He's got to run away. This is what we're doing. Insane. Next one. Using force to prevent a crime in progress will no longer be an option. The definition of imminent harm in both versions of the bill, absent an arrest or escape, that officers face a situation in which there is a risk of serious physical injury or death. This means that a risk of non-deadly physical force would no longer justify any police force. Any. So if the officer's life is, the risk to the officer's life is quote unquote not non-deadly, just punching him in the face or something like that, they are now forbidden to use any force in return. So the predicted result of this is that officers who have to forcefully intervene to prevent an assault and battery or even an indecent assault and battery could be disciplined, decertified, and even sued on the basis because, they got rid of qualified immunity too. So there's that. Next one. Arrests will likely increase because of an inflexible standard that will limit intervention and mitigation steps. Since no use of force will be permitted to simply stop a crime from occurring unless an arrest is made, the new statute ironically will force officers to make more arrests, which is exactly what this is supposed to prevent. So, according to their theory here, under the new proposed law, officers will have to be instructed that any use of force, absent a risk of serious injury or death, is forbidden unless they make an arrest. So, you do the math here. Instead of using force, they're just going to arrest you. Duh. So, that's that. Let's go on to the next page here. It is unrealistic and unwise to condition all use of force on de-escalation. This is one of their favorite words, de-escalation. We need to de-escalate. I got news for you people. The cops have been trying to de-escalate for years now. They do that like every time they go out. Every time they try to de-escalate the situation, but sometimes it doesn't work out. So that's another thing they want to get rid of. Then last thing here, an overly technical definition of acceptable force is unfair to the public who rely on officers to intervene without hesitation. In both bills, decertification could be based solely on violation of this new force standard. So now cops are going to have to get certified. And who's going to be on these boards to certify them? There will be no cops on the boards. So people who know nothing about law enforcement, I don't know the first fucking thing, guys, about law enforcement. I don't know it. I'm sure whatever they're doing, all of the techniques that they learned to take, detain suspects and stuff like that is not for shits and giggles. It is for a freaking reason. I was a teacher for a long time, and there was nothing that I hated more than when people who had never taught a day in their life, which is everybody who runs the public schools, decided that they knew how to teach kids more effectively and that they would tell you how to do your job and stuff like that, but they'd never actually been in a classroom. Call me crazy. I believe I don't tell firefighters how to put out fires. I don't do that. I don't tell cops how to make arrests. I don't tell lawyers how to prepare freaking motions, right? I don't tell doctors how to do surgery. But now we're going to have whole boards of people to certify police officers who know nothing about it. Some cop gets a bullshit complaint in his file over, use of force or whatever. Next thing you know, he's out of a job because of that. Or he could face criminal prosecution. Let's look at some of the people that voted yes on this one that I think are somewhat vulnerable, some more than others. Okay, so let's go through some of these people. So first up, we have Patricia Howard. So I don't know if we have turtle riders from Somerset, Dighton, or Swansea in here, down in the South Coast. She's been unopposed since 2008 when she first became a state representative. Unopposed. However, those three towns, Somerset, Dighton, and Swansea, some of those are Trump towns. Some of those are red towns. Yet they've had this Democrat who voted for this bill who's just, nobody runs against her. Nobody runs against her. Why is that? Because the Republican Party in the state is a fucking joke. Then you got this dude, Joseph Wagner from Chicopee. He has not been opposed since getting on 12 years ago. And in 2014, he got $500 from the state police union. How about that? How about that? How about unions stop giving money to Democrats? How about that? So there he is right there. If if you live in Chicopee, you want to run against him, let me know. He's not used to it. He wouldn't know what to do. Next up to that, we got James Arciero, who represents the communities of Chelmsford, Littleton, and Westford. He's been there since 2008. He gets elected. He's hardly ever challenged, but the closest anyone's ever come is 64-36 against him. So that would be more of an uphill one, but let's give it a shot. Linda Dean Campbell represents Haverhill and Methuen. She's had no Republican challenger since 2010, but yet she only won with 58% of the vote. But nobody wants to run against her. Why is that? Then we have this douchebag, Josh Cutler. This guy is extremely vulnerable. I identified him as one of the more vulnerable people on my list. Josh Cutler represents the towns of Duxbury, Hanson, and Pembroke. I know we have turtle riders from those towns. I hear from them all the time. Those three towns: Pembroke, Duxbury, Hanson. He is routinely challenged. Nobody ever runs against him. But he's won with as little as 53%. 53%. When Republicans win with 53%, the Democrats aren't so kind to not run anyone against them in the next election. If you live in Duxbury, Hanson, or Pembroke, start a sticker campaign. I got your back. Let's get rid of Josh Cutler, this douchebag. Then you got this asshole, another douchebag, Michael Day, who represents the communities of Stoneham and Winchester, home of Kirk Seamus Minahan. He gets challenged by the same woman who I've met a couple times. I think she's on the Board of Selectmen in Stoneham. Every 2 years. His margin of victory has been between 51 and 58%, but it is increasing. So perhaps we need a new candidate in those towns to challenge this guy. This one especially really has to go. Let me tell you. Carol Doherty, who represents Taunton and parts of Easton. This seat was held for years by Shauna O'Connell, who is a Republican. But Shauna recently got elected mayor of Taunton. So the seat was put up for a special election in June. And she was running against a 28-year-old woman, first time in politics, named Kelly Dooner. She beat her 57-43 because she was on the school committee. I don't know if it was in Easton or Taunton. But 57-43, the same woman is running against her. Kelly Dooner is running against her. I sent Kelly a Facebook message tonight. I'd love to have her on the show. But she'll be running against her again in November. So if you live in Taunton or Easton, vote for Kelly Dooner. That's how you can fight back against these people. This woman needs to pay the price for what she did. She just got there. Then we got Michelle Dubois. Oh, for fuck's sake. We all know about her by now. One of my nemesises. This is the same woman who I don't even know where to start. First came on our radar in 2017 when she alerted the nice drug dealing communities in Brock. She represents like Southern Brockton and the two Bridgewaters, East and West Bridgewater. So she puts a sound out, and obviously the liberal part of her base then is going to be in Brockton, and East and West Bridgewater are going to be the more conservative part of her base because this district's actually wide open. And she put a sound out 2 years ago, let drug dealers in Brockton know ICE is coming. Remember that? ICE, baby? Yeah. ICE is coming for you. Hide the stash. Move it to a different house. Then she complained that the Thomas Hooker entrance was offensive to her as a woman. The Thomas Hooker entrance to the State House, because hooker is an offensive word. Literally a child says something like that. She's a freaking joke. She's an absolute freaking joke. And my guy, John Cruz, has run against her. He's the brother of Tim Cruz, who is the district attorney in Plymouth County. And John Cruz ran against her in 2018 as a sticker campaign. In 2016, she got 56% this last election and 51 before that. It's really not that much, guys. 51. You put a solid candidate against this woman, she falls. Now, she does have a Democratic challenger this time who I'd like to get on the show. He's a young guy, Jack Lally. I don't know how he would vote on this police bill, but I like to pick his mind about it. Carola Dykema, who represents Holliston, Hopkinton, Southborough, and Westborough. I assume Southborough is probably the most liberal of those communities, but She, as you can see, the Black Lives Matter, whatever filter there. So you know what she's all about. She's won with between 52 and 61% of the vote. So we can get rid of her too. So if you live in any of those towns, those are nice towns. If you're already taking out the papers, let me know. I'll endorse you. Tricia Farley Bouvier. She represents Pittsfield. I don't know if we have a lot of turtle riders in Pittsfield because Pittsfield's in the ass crack of nowhere. It's on the New York border. It's like 2 miles from where I live, and I'm in Central Mass. But Pittsfield is another one of those mid-sized cities like Chicopee or Haverhill that's like liberal, but not that liberal. You know what I mean? And believe it or not, she's been there since like 2010. She's never had an opponent. No one's ever run against her. I think if somebody steps up to run, she's vulnerable. She is. Ken Gordon represents Burlington, Wilmington, and Bedford. He was unopposed the last election, but he's been challenged several times, and he's won with between 52 and 58% of the vote. Here's another one, Danielle Gregoire, who also represents parts of Westboro, Northboro, and Marlboro. She's won with between 50 and 63% of the vote. 63 was the most recent one, though. She might be one of the harder ones to get rid of, but you never know. Give it a shot. Natalie Higgins is a radical SJW leftist who wants to defund the police. Like some of these people, like Ken Gordon, will pretend to be moderates and stuff like that. Not this one. This one is a full-fledged fuck the police, defund the police. She voted to give herself a raise months after getting the fucking job, doubled her own salary. And Natalie Higgins she represented Leominster. Just the whole city of Leominster is one district. Yeah, each district in the state is between around 40,000 people in our state representative district, which is the population of Leominster. Thus, they get their own district. David LaBeouf. He represents my old district before I moved to Holden. He represents the Webster Square part of Worcester and the entire town of Leicester. The only reason he has this seat is because Kate Campanelli fell in love. That's the bottom line. Unfortunately, Kate Campanelli fell in love. Kate Campanelli, I love her. She's my girl. She's a Republican. She held that seat from 2014 to 2018, right? And she won it pretty convincingly. But then she started dating Peter Durant, who is a Republican state representative from Spencer. And they fell in love. And they moved in. But they didn't move into her place. They moved into his. So she moved. She couldn't live there anymore. She could no longer run. So we lost the seat on account of Kate Campanelli falling in love because the guy that ran against him, David LaBeouf, said a lot of stupid shit. He's a Worcester firefighter, actually. Said a lot of like crazy shit that turned people off from him. It was also an anti-Trump election in 2018. So now we have this guy. He's not a moderate. He is a fucking radical. He hates Turtleboy. He like brags about like, oh, Turtleboy used to live in my district. He's real asshole. Look at this tool bag. Get rid of him. Get rid of him. John Mahoney. I can't believe this fucking asshole. I fucking hate him so much. Former owner of Mahoney's Bar. Great place to go back in the day if you were underage and you wanted to have some chick, blow a line of coke off of your schlong. Yeah, that was Mahoney's. That was the kind of crowd that he wanted in his bar. Nobody in Mahoney's was 21. Nobody. And he knew it. For years this was going on. It's fucking shade ball. He ran for city council, lost. Then he ran, there was a state rep seat open. I think Bob Spillane wasn't running, so he decided to run for it. And he got it. He represents only Worcester. He represents the west side of Worcester, which is the highest voter turnout and the nicest part of Worcester. It's like the suburbs when you're in the west side of Worcester. And he's never been challenged. Never been challenged. Nobody's ever run against him since he got on there in 2010. Can you believe that? I went on his OCPF records. Karen Polito has donated thousands, and Karen Polito's a Republican. This guy's a Democrat. She's donated thousands of dollars to his campaign. Fuck Karen Polito too while we're at it. Then you got this guy, Paul McMurtry, who represents Dedham, Walpole, and Westwood. Those are a little bit more liberal towns, getting closer to Boston there. He's only been challenged once, and he won with 67%. So getting him out would be a long shot, but give it a shot if you live in those towns. Next up, another long shot. Christina Minichiu. Also represents parts of Haverhill, Methuen, and North Andover, so a little south of the district when we were just in. She's won with between 64 and 66%. But again, give it a shot. Brian Murray, who I'm hot and cold on sometimes. He said he was going to help me out with the DASA thing. Didn't really do that. He represents Milford, Hopedale, Mendon, and Medway. And he's won with between 55 and 56%. That is not insurmountable. If you live in Milford, if you live in Hopedale, Medway, or Mendon, take out papers. What do you have to lose? Next up, this is the most unforgivable one for me. Unforgivable. And I posted this on Facebook. This guy right here in the middle is Harold Norton from Clinton, an alleged moderate Democrat who has actually a lot of pull. He's on some committees in the State House. And here he is in this picture. This is Richard Grimes, the former police chief of Weymouth. This is Andrew Sluckus, the police chief from Auburn. And this is Frank Frederickson, the police chief from Yarmouth. I know this guy is I'm going to say his last name wrong. He's the head of all police chiefs in the state from Dudley, my old school where I used to teach. Good guy. And all of these guys, why are they posing with him? Well, because these three lost officers in the line of duty. And he's posing with them because he allegedly supports police officers. Police unions have given this guy a lot of money over the years. Right? He's pretending to care about them, saying he has their back. He voted yes. Unforgivable. This is the ultimate betrayal. What a feckless coward he is. Harold Norton represents Clinton, Berlin, Boylston. No one lives in those towns, but Lancaster, Northborough, and parts of Sterling. If you live in any of those towns and Harold Norton represents you, vote for. I heard he's not running this year. I have not confirmed that. But whoever it is, vote Republican, baby. This is Tram Nguyen, who beat Jim Lyons, who's the chairman of the Republican Party in the state. She represents Andover, Boxford, North Andover, and Tewksbury. She's got to go. Then you got this guy, Jim ODay, the northeast side of Worcester and West Boylston. West Boylston is a somewhat conservative town too. Remember, they had that police chief there that was against the lockdown, and I wrote about him. He's been unchallenged since 2012. Just look at this guy. What a douchebag. The police unions reached out to him. He said, there's nothing I can do for you. This is Jeff Roy, who represents Franklin and Medway. If you live in either of those towns, he's only won with 54 and 58% of the vote. He can be beaten. The most vulnerable of all of them is this guy, though. This wannabe bootleg Dukakis, Ted Speliotis, who represents Danvers, parts of Peabody, and Middleton. I know we have Turtle Riders in those areas. The last three elections, he's won by 51, 51, and 52%. That's as close as you can get. And finally, this douchebag, Ron Mariano. When you look at this guy, he's the ultimate, he's been in politics forever. Forever. He wins by a lot, 66 to 69%. But I know in Weymouth and Quincy, we have a lot of Turtle Riders. A lot of them. Anybody runs against this guy, we're going to give him a run for his money. Trust me. So that's my spiel. That's my spiel on that. I'm telling you, if you want to run, just fucking run. I don't care who you are. If you're running against anybody I'm talking about tonight, I'm going to use my platform to endorse the shit out of you. It's too late to get the signatures now. However, there's a primary election on September 1st. And if you pick the Republican ballot, all you need is 150 write-in votes in any district, and you get on the ballot for the primary election in November. That's all you got to do. 150. So if you want to run for office, let me know. I'll spread the word.